So without further ado, let's get started. Chris, thank you for doing this. And I guess the first question would be, you've been the head of TED for 15 years. I guess you just a few minutes ago, you were like, wow, it's been that long. Why now? Why now for this book?
It's about time.
It's about time, that's right.
First of all, hello everyone, and thanks for taking the time to come out. It's great to see you. I feel like I should do this more. At every stop on the book tour, there was always questions about TEDx. Everyone's kind of in awe of it at one level, and no one really understands the scale of it. So it was very exciting getting that. To go back to your question, I've been doing this for 15 years. The first few years I had no clue really what I was doing. I hadn't run a conference before. There was no speaker prep per se. We booked a few people, they showed up, but early on we quickly discovered that that wasn't the best way to go about this. Like in my very first TED, a guy started his talk saying, I was wondering what to say to you guys as I was driving down here this morning. I was like, I hate you. That is so disrespectful. And he gave this rambling talk, and he was a great futurist and a terrible talk. So slowly, we started pushing people to put in the appropriate level of effort. And of course, when the talk started going viral online, people suddenly started putting in much greater effort. And from that moment, people were eager to get feedback and to engage us. And so I guess over the last few years, we've really dialed up the coaching process. And I've ended up figuring out, we actually learned something by watching all these speakers close up. We've started to build a theory about what makes for a great talk. And given that everyone's always asking, we thought, it's time, there's enough here to write a book. And the key to the book was writing to 50 of the top speakers and saying, I need your advice. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And that really helped shape a lot of the content of the book.
Right. Did it actually take that long for you to figure out what the formula is? Because I know one of the things you say, there is no formula, but obviously you developed a method and you can come up with enough principles. But did you need that long to be able to suddenly see that, or is it all kind of happen? Did you know this 10 years ago and you just took the 5 years ago and you just now took the time to do it?
I mean, we knew some of it 15 years ago. In the early time I was doing TED, we'd send out people a little plaque, a little stone tablet with the TED commandments on it. And it was things that were helpful. Some of them are still in the TEDx guidance rules. It's like, don't read your script, don't overshoot the clock, say something that matters, tell a story, reveal a bit of who you are, park your ego. I mean, all those things have been part of the TED mantra for a long time. But funnily enough, the more we've done this, the more we've realized that the rules, the kind of commandments-based approach probably isn't appropriate, that people are already tending to copy other speakers. And in many ways, one of our jobs is to stop people being rules-based or formulaic and try to encourage more nuance, more variety. And so to do that, you have to have some underlying principles, like an underlying theory, if you like, of what's really going on here. And so one of the exciting things, at least for me in the book, was realizing that you could start with this theory of the core to a talk being the transfer of an idea.
Right.
And if you start with that, it's amazing how much follows from that.
Right. That makes sense. So we'll open it up to questions, but and one quick one before we do that. How did TEDx feature in either the creation of this book or your vision for how it gets used?
Well, TEDx has long been, apart from all the rest that it is, it's long been this amazing global laboratory for figuring out how this ancient art of public speaking is being reinvented. TEDx has surfaced some of the best speakers on TED.com today. Now, Brené Brown plays a significant part in the book, for example. And TEDx has surfaced all kinds of actual talk innovations, some of which I mention in here, like John Bohannon, who I think performed at TEDx Brussels initially, but it was like talk as dance. His instead of a PowerPoint, he had dance as sort of as visual aids. And I love the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of events out there just pushing the needle, and I think we've already learned a lot from that. There's more that we could and should learn, and it's actually part of the exciting conversation going forward. That we are reinventing an ancient art.
That's right. That's great. And I know also just from having worked with you that as we got to the few final drafts of this book, like we shared it with a few TEDx organizers who gave you some feedback as well and helped you tighten it up. So that's great. All right, first question. We already have 4 of them here. So this is from Ben Creo. What advice do you have for handling a speaker who is not responsive to coaching?
Yes, good question, Ben. And I suspect this is harder for a typical TEDx organizer than for us, because most people who go and speak at the main event, they've got a high chance of their talk going online, that they tend to be responsive. I think it's largely. I mean, I think certainly we need to go in with an attitude of respect. There are a lot of people out there who do know how to talk, and I think if someone is a great speaker and a proven speaker, there sometimes is a case for saying, look, the key thing we want is for you to share what you're passionate about. We know you're good at doing this, so come and do it. And I think occasionally, if it's someone who's an accomplished speaker, that it is right to to dial back our process a little bit and let them do it. But if you know that someone basically isn't that good a speaker right now and that they need some coaching, I think it's just about being firm and just saying, look, we have found time and time again that by going through this process, it actually does make a difference. Even a great speaker can be made that much better. And by the way, our format is quirky, and sometimes people who are great at speaking for 45 minutes need some guidance when it comes down to compressing a talk to our time limit and still shining in that shorter time limit.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the key things I think that people get wrong is how do you compress? The trap is that you compress by stripping everything out and pushing all that you want to say into summary form, and then your talk has this sort of feel of a bunch of high-level statements and nothing is fleshed out, and that is absolutely the wrong way to compress. You have to compress by stripping out everything but the main idea, so that you've got time to develop that idea properly.
Yeah.
And people don't mess. So I think it's probably different strokes for different folks, but trying to keep. I worry about us. Sometimes sounding like when you've got a great thinker out there, it's probably not our job to be disrespectful to them, and so it needs doing with a certain amount of nuance, I think.
And I guess it also, like, when you say they're not responsive to coaching, is it because they won't or is it because they can't, right? So I was at a TEDx event, there was a speaker in there who was at a could not smile and looked so uncomfortable, but I found out that he tried, but he just couldn't smile. And so, you know what, he can't smile, get up, and he had an important message to say. And I guess that's the nuance that you're talking about. And sometimes if they're trying and they just can't quite get it right, if the message is still good.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key question is whether you have reason to believe that they're a good speaker or not. It's okay to allow quite a bit of variety in different styles of speaking, and we've certainly relaxed a bit with some people. Like when Danny Kahneman came to TED, he tried originally to give like a TED talk, standing on a stage, no lectern, and he was uncomfortable. It wasn't working, and so we let him go back to speaking the way he was comfortable speaking, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah, good. A technical one, what do you think is a good calendar to get the speakers ready? Like if you think of the timeline for when to start.
I mean, again, different strokes for different folks, but for a typical talk, I think it's great for you, the organizer, to see a script or at least an outline of the talk 3 months in advance, ideally, so that there's time to give feedback on content, and then the first online rehearsal, if you have time for that in your process, which I think we definitely now encourage, right? you know, 4 to 6 weeks ahead of the event. You know, and that still gives plenty of time for people to prepare. But I mean, some people are ready to start working on it even before then, and some can do a great job still on, you know, on a week's notice. I think it's important not to be too rigid on it.
It helps you mitigate your risk if you start earlier, but you can be flexible. Yeah.
Yes.
That question, by the way, was from Stephanie Conrad.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Let's take a question from Randy Bretz at TEDx Lincoln. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you call the through line, which obviously got a prominent feature both on your online talk and here. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I just mentioned that that in cutting a talk down to fit a TED time limit, the key there is to focus on a single idea, so that you can unpack that properly. And that idea really you can then think of as the through line of your talk. So I almost think of that as this cord running through the talk to which every part of the talk is connected in some way. The through line defines the structure of your talk and really is the idea that is at the heart of it. But there are lots of things that will connect to that. You know, there might be an introductory anecdote as to how you got interested in this. There might be, why was this historically a problem? There might be some exploration of other approaches to this topic and here's why they don't work. There might be a metaphor that tries to make sense of the idea you're trying to build. There might be examples that show it in practice. And you can think of all these as like little branches of a tree connected to this central through line. And but I think requiring that a speaker have a through line for a talk is a really helpful way of structuring the talk. It can be helpful to the speaker, and I think it's something that you should be able to express in about 15 words. You know, a through line isn't just summarize your work. It's here is the unexpected idea that I want to share. Here is something that is fresh. It wants to be a headline where someone goes, oh, really? And so it's finding that is, I think, a key part to structuring your talk the right way.
Great. Let's pick. We'll go high concept and tactical. So we'll keep switching. Right. Here's one. How do you manage a speaker? This is from Safra in TEDx Youth at Colombo in Sri Lanka.
Hello, Safra.
How do you manage a speaker who does not believe in drafts?
Oh, so I think it's perfectly legitimate not to believe in drafts. So if I could maybe even back up on that, if you've read the book, you'll have seen that in the chapter on talk preparation, I talk about this split between TED speakers on whether you should draft and memorize a talk or not. And there's pretty much a 50-50 split between them actually on which way to go here. A lot of people, like Elizabeth Gilbert, for example, think that you should write out every word, create the draft, memorize it, and so forth. And there are traps there, and there's a lot of good reasons. I mean, the key trap and the key reason why some people don't think you should go that way is that they worry about a talk sounding robotic, right? And they worry about memorizing and then freezing, as has happened at least once spectacularly on the TED stage. So I mean, the other way to produce a talk is not to produce a draft, but to produce some kind of outline, and to to build it basically. I don't know. Here are 7 bullet points that I want to cover. I know what each of those are, and I know what the transitions are. So I think what I say in the book, at any rate, for people who want to produce the talk that way, is that you still really need to rehearse it. It's really important to do that. Otherwise, you're going to end up either rambling or going over or missing out some of the key things you want to say. Or you'll end up with a talk where you're just unsure about the transitions, and that is unsatisfying to an audience. Like, even if you've got a brilliant set of slides that aren't text, they're sort of images that take you through the talk. If you go, okay, I've said all I want to say on that topic, what's next? Click. Oh yeah, that's a picture of a city. I was going to talk about cities next. that is so much less satisfying than
Right.
having the worked out line that says, and this is most heavily seen in click cities, and so I think what I would say, you say is, okay, fine, you don't need a draft of the full script of the talk, but let's talk about what your outline is, and by the way, I really think it's an important part of the process for you still to rehearse the talk.
Yeah, interesting. I saw one talk in the TED Salon in London where the speaker had, instead of notes, his speaker notes were actually just icons of images, like it was a monkey and a banana and a dollar sign, and that actually those were, instead of written draft, it was his way to remember his story. And for some people that, and obviously for him, it worked very well.
That's fine. I still think rehearsal is still a legitimate requirement. I think it doesn't have to be a script.
But it will reveal. If there's a problem with not having a script, it will reveal it. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. There is a question from Sarah Harding at TEDx Traverse City. How do you decide when to do an interview format versus a talk?
Hello, Sarah. Two reasons. One is when it's a public figure. I would say most interviews are done with people who are already quite well known. And there is both a challenge there and an opportunity. The challenge is that they probably don't have that much time to prepare a talk, and they may well not prepare a good one. And if they do, it may well be kind of promotional and not as sort of forthcoming as you want it to be. So for all those reasons, an interview can be the right way to go there. It means that they can come in without the sort of pressure of doing a talk and basically respond. And from your side, it means that you can push them on questions that you think that they might not otherwise be forthcoming on. The interview format also works well for people where you basically want to cover a sort of a spectrum of topics. I think in a typical interview, I'd relax almost the idea of there's not really one through line other than the person's life or work. I mean, it's definitely possible in an interview format to explore multiple topics. I've tried with, I think a trap. Oh, sorry, I'll go on and say that in a minute. But in terms of how else you decide.
Do you feel? Do you feel like when you if the person is either famous or you don't want to prepare as much and you think you can get a better interview with them out of a talk, do you feel like you're sacrificing the potential of that talk recorded asset to be spread because it doesn't come across as well?
That's perfectly. I don't think that many interviews really have that sort of wow impact that a great talk has, but they can still work reasonably powerfully. I mean, the ones, when I think back, the most recent one with Linus Torvalds actually got a really strong reaction at the conference and reasonable reaction online as well, because I don't think he would have given a talk.
Right.
I mean, we actually, he wouldn't. We tried to get him to come and give a talk. He doesn't give a talk. He doesn't have a point of view.
Yeah.
in many ways.
And he worked really well as an interview. I mean, it had a lot of energy and personality to it.
So I think I would save interviews for high-profile figures who are uncomfortable giving a talk, and where you think you can just cover a broader array of content. And I really like the visual chapter marker format that we've done, where you encourage them to provide you with certain key images, or you come up with ones that you want to show that take you through some of the key things that you want to discuss. Because from both for someone who isn't a born interviewer or interviewee, it just gives structure to the whole thing and keeps it moving and gives people something to look at, and it allows. I think it's a good sort of halfway point between an unstructured interview and a planned talk.
Right. Okay, good. So now the questions are coming in faster than we're answering them.
So we'll go.
So Antonella from TEDx Madrid is asking, this is an easy question, more straightforward question. Will you give this book a TED speaker before they start preparing or after the event has happened?
We haven't, funny enough, we haven't actually formally discussed that internally. I imagine that we will offer the book to any speaker who wants it early on in the process. It's kind of daunting to read, and with some speakers, I mean, the last thing you want to do, I think, is give it to them after they prepare their talk, like 3 weeks before the conference, and they get there, go, oh my God, I have to change the whole thing. So I think, yes, I think early on.
Okay, cool.
But not, it's not a requirement. We're trying to distill some of the guidelines down to shorten.
Great. Kevin Rabinovich, who is a TEDx youth organizer from Columbia, South Carolina, is asking, what advice or takeaways do you have as it relates to this book, I presume, that are most applicable to youth events?
I mean, I think most of it does in a way. It's not specifically age related. With kids, I mean, watch out for performance. You know, one of the things I'm wary of in the book, and I think probably all of you have already seen, is that a lot of people want to come onto the stage kind of to perform. I'm a great speaker, give me my chance. And I think it's possible some youth speakers especially fit into that category. So I mean, I think be a bit aware of that. If it's youth in the audience, it's just the first principle, like being very, very sure that the content actually is of interest and relevance to that audience. It may be harder to do that when it's a different demographic, and probably having a little testing group of kids to double check the proposed content is not a bad idea. But I think the actual principles of making an impact, a lot of those basically carry on. Yeah, I think so.
That makes sense. This is Claire from TEDx Taipei. What are some of the considerations for deciding the length of each speaker's talk? Because I know 18 minutes is the limit, but we go, I mean, there can be as short as 8 minutes. How do you go about deciding?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Claire. And there's no, I don't talk about that specifically in the book. There's this sort of idea of what is the natural length to express an idea. And I think it kind of takes judgment. Basically, like a leading intellectual who's trying to share some major new piece of work, you want them to have the full time slot they can have to unpack that idea properly. There are certain types of talks that are showing something simpler. You know, we had a talk on how to tie your shoes, right? That right. Worked perfectly well in 3 minutes, and even that may have been too long. Right. So it's, you want to have enough time to unpack the idea with an example to show why it matters and so forth. And so it depends on the complexity of the argument and the concept. The more complex a piece of work it is, the more time you need to allow to kind of pave the way for it. And there are some talks which just completely fail at like 6 minutes or 9 minutes because they've just been skimmed over, and it's like, yeah, but I don't really believe you yet. You know, you haven't convinced me yet. That you just, and so it's a matter. It's judgment. It's like getting a sense of, does this really convince? Does this really land at this length? And if not, let's give them more time and go deeper. Yeah. It's true that we've pulled back a bit on, like, a lot of talks at main TED are no longer 18 minutes. You know, often we start with a 14 or 12 minute guideline, and we'll push it back up if someone comes in with something that's so compelling, but we just know that there's more that they need to say. Right. We can go back up. So it's one good guideline is to say, try and prepare something in 12 minutes, and we may adjust that in rehearsal.
Yeah. And we do see, I mean, from our side, we do see more and more TEDx events coming in. I would say the average of 12 now. But again, as you're saying, customize it to the complexity of the idea and go from there. Okay, let me see. Somebody I didn't pick before. Maya Lalal from TEDx Tel Aviv is asking, how important is that an idea, how important is it that an idea is actionable? Which I think is maybe is not particularly addressed in here, but when you're thinking about curation and making this meaningful to the person who's watching it.
I mean, I think all ideas are actionable. It just depends on what time scale you're talking about. Some talks get their power by changing how you see the world. And so it's not like there's an action right away, but it's going to change who you are in a way. You know, like a talk, I don't know, like Barry Schwartz's famous talk on the paradox of choice, right? Is that an actionable talk? You know, you'll be happier if you have fewer choices in your life. I mean, it is actionable, but kind of over a long timeline. It's not like go out right now and start a campaign for less choice. So I don't think I would start with that as the driving thing. I think for me the driver of what makes a great program is having ideas that are just compelling, that can either change how you see the world or change how you see future possibility. And let the idea itself drive whether action will happen. Ideas are powerful whether they ignite action short term or whether they just change mindsets and make people wiser, if you like, for the long term.
That's an interesting way of thinking about action. Okay, so here's a one that I'm not sure exactly. Is Gerardo? I don't see him on camera, but Gerardo, get ready to type it because I'm not sure I'm picking it up the question directly. Gerardo is an organizer of TEDx Mexico City. Please tell us your thoughts about improvisation and conversation using Open TED. Open TED was. I mean, do you understand the question? I feel like there's.
So Open TED is a still nascent initiative that we have out there that's basically saying to anyone out there, look, if you want to record a TED talk direct to camera, do that and submit it to us, and you can you can innovate with the format if you wish. We've had a few responses to that so far. I don't think they've set the world alight yet, but it's actually something that I believe in quite strongly for the future, that there's going to be growing interest in public speaking. Not everyone can find a public venue, so presenting yourself direct to the internet, so to speak, is actually a powerful thing for people to do. So I don't know. I think it's a fertile area for innovation that I'm very interested in, and I'm actually curious to engage the TEDx community in that because I know many of you have ideas about that. Maybe I may not have answered your question, by the way. If I haven't, ask it again. But
maybe in some way it shows that it's hard to put together a talk online, and that when you get a lot of help from the organizers and from coaches, etc., it's easy. You can do a good talk, but when you're on your own, right, maybe at home and trying to put it together, it's kind of been challenging. I know a few people who wanted to do it, but then backed out because they just didn't know how to do it on their own.
I mean, in general, what happens online is that people try things and you get validate. If like 1 in 100 takes off and gets validation, and then people see, oh, how did they get the views? Oh, I get why they got the views. They were compelling for this reason. I can do that actually, and so we learn from each other. Yeah. I would like to see that happening at Open TED and elsewhere.
Yeah. Okay, good. Here's a question. I'm sure this is something you've dealt with before. From Betuan Serik at University of Istanbul. What should an organizer do if the speaker freaks out before going on stage? And maybe you can, without naming names, share some anecdotes on that.
Well, we've had speakers freak out while on stage.
Did you ever speakers freaking out on stage?
We had them implode on stage, for example, where they just gradually died. They started drinking water, freezing, pulling out the iPhone. What am I saying next? And you could just sweating.
It's a panic sinking
and what started off as a great talk kind of blew up in a really painful way. Beforehand, I think it's about preparation. I mean, I think people. Ideally, what would happen is you get over this question of fear beforehand, and you encourage speakers to use their fear as motivation to prepare. And in the preparation process, they get comfortable. If someone literally freaks out before going on stage, I mean, probably a short-term thing is to reposition them. Say it's okay, we'll move you to later on in the day. this is going to be fine, and then try and find out that one of the best things to do is to, if they have a friend or a colleague who's with them, is engage them, have that person sit in the second row, and let them come on and kind of give the talk conversationally to that person. I think part of where a lot of the fear comes from in talking is that people think that speaking is a different thing from the kind of conversational talk that they usually do, and they come on and think they have to orate, and they speak out to this empty space above the audience's heads, and they're sort of lost in their own world and feel, and that's a very fearful sort of place to be, as opposed to saying, look, Jim, there he is sitting in the front row, just give your talk to him. Here's a bottle of water at the back of the stage, your script is back here. If you freeze, you just cough, go to the back of the stage, have a drink of water, look at your notes. If necessary, you can tell the audience you're feeling nervous, but you're passionate about this topic, damn it. And so bear with me. I'm going to get through this. This matters to me. So and audiences will burst into applause. They'll embrace speakers and so forth. So there's many things there, but I think having having those sort of backup plan is a good thing. If someone's nervous, I think a really good idea, by the way, is to encourage someone to have, if there's an anecdote early on in their talk, that's an easy thing for someone to do, tell a story. If it's funny, so much the better. With Monica Lewinsky, there's a moment in her talk, if you listen to it, there's a moment she gives a story about a dating proposition she had. Everyone laughed at the end of it, and you can hear her sigh at that laughter. That was the moment when she knew the talk was going to be okay. She was terrified coming into it. Yeah. But if you can have a story that evokes a little laughter, boom, you're good to go from that point on.
And a couple of other things I heard is remind them that you can, if they get stuck and they need to go to your notes, you can edit it out in post-production. That your goal in post-production is to iron out the hiccups. And I've also seen people sitting in stage, sitting in the first row, and their job is, if you get stuck and you forget your lines, they whisper to you, like, what's the next paragraph, so you don't have to go back to. Yeah. So they're all different kinds of crutches.
Well, one of the crutches that I used once, literally when this was before I had to interview the NSA, and I was scared. Push-ups. In the corridor behind the theatre.
You were scared?
Going, yeah. Like, and you have so much adrenaline in you, you'll amaze yourself how many you can do. It's like, just keep going, breathe, but burn off some of the adrenaline, and that helps a lot as well.
That's interesting. Do you do you still get nervous before you go on?
Sure.
And if you identified a pattern as to when are you nervous now?
I mean, if you know something's not quite right already, that doesn't help. But yeah, if I feel like I'm being pushed to the edge of my comfort zone or something that I haven't done before, that's definitely can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, that's very reassuring to hear that, Mr. Anderson.
Fear and excitement, by the way, are almost the same emotion. There's just the only difference between them is one, there's more confidence in the outcome, right? And so a little bit, if you use fear, motivation to prepare, and you just get a little bit more confidence, suddenly it turns into excitement.
I like that. Remind all your speakers that fear and excitement are very closely related. A quick question from Fatia at TEDx Lyon in France. The book has been translated into Spanish and English. What about German? And maybe talk about like how many talks it's been how many languages it's being translated into. I know Russian soon as well. I was in Moscow.
Yeah, it should be. It is being translated into German and French. I think those launches are in the early autumn. Susan has a full timetable, so if you write to Susan at TED.com, she can tell you the date of any of the launches. It's in simplified Chinese soon, and then complex Chinese soon, and then simplified. So it's in most of the main languages.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
How much? This is maybe I'll change. Kevin Rabinovich again asking and a question that I'll tweak a little bit. He's asking how much of the book applies to direct to camera talks, and maybe we'll take this opportunity to get your perspective on the new direct to camera talks and kind of the early experiments and what you think about them.
I mean, I think a lot of it does still apply. The whole point of direct to camera is meant to be, you know, a modern version of the ancient art. You've got a camera looking at a human face, tone of voice, you know, the humanity of the person, their eye contact, their whatever. All those things are still there. More importantly, just the structure of the talk and of how you know, show someone why it matters that they should listen to this, and why this issue is significant, and then building it. A lot of those things are still the same. Obviously, you know, the fact that you can do a reshoot, you know, some of the nerves of a public stage are probably different, and the trap would be that some of the energy of the public stage is missing, and I think on a lot of direct to camera experiments, possibly including, you know, my own with the short video I did for this talk, it's not finding the right intimacy, you know, the right way of directly addressing the listener at home and making them feel like it's not fake is hard to do. It's not obvious to do. I think the best experiments, as far as I can see, use a camera where you literally have the camera's close in and you have a human face right here. And so instead of talking like this to hello world and so on, it's more like hello. You know, I'm glad you're here because I care about this. But it's all being experimented on.
Yeah.
And you know, I definitely think there's in direct to camera an even more informal style is good. I argue in the book that on stage we're moving fast away from oration as traditionally viewed, the sort of the slow, very deliberate start of speaking with lots of significant pauses,
Right.
to a more conversational of hello, you in the front row, here I am, and this is why I care about this. And online, I think direct to camera, it's probably even more like that.
Right.
But honestly, the styles are going to evolve quickly, and as soon as something takes off and a bunch of people copy it, 2 minutes after that, it's already boring and cliched, and something else is going to work. I think it's probably going to move quite quickly.
Right. And speaking of that, I guess I should just mention that direct to camera is still an innovative format that is being experimented on here at head office. We do have some TEDxers that are participating in the pilot program and are helping us create new formats. If you have an idea, just send us an email so that it gets pre-approved and gets to be part of that experimentation. It's not yet a format that is broadly approved for the TEDx events. You just talked about, you know, oration, people kind of doing oration as a common format. We have at TED a lot of talks that we tag when they come in, story of self. And the question here is from Mariki. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. There seems to be a trend of talks with a lot of personal stories, almost as if the life of the speaker is the guideline of the idea across the stage. What are your thoughts on this? Because I know a lot of our organized, they find interesting personalities, and I know they actually can be interesting in the room sometimes. But what do you think about that in the context of an idea worth spreading?
I mean, those start from a good intent of you know, this notion that before someone will open up their minds to a speaker, they want to have a sort of a human connection. And so it's quite natural to start a talk saying, hey, when I was 5 years old, I had this amazing moment in my life when I did this. And the goal there is that you start to build empathy with the speaker and care about what they're about to say. But it can absolutely be overdone, and often has been overdone. And the real trap and the tragedy is when it's all story, no idea. So the overwhelming principle that has to be understood is that storytelling is in the service of an idea. It's not storytelling for its own sake. And you hear a lot of loose talk about how public speaking is essentially storytelling. I don't think that's right. I think storytelling is one of the key tools, and it's an important one. But a lot of the best aspects of talks aren't actually storytelling. They're explaining, they're persuading, they're showing, and stories really matter, and they're the easiest part of a talk to give, and are probably the easiest part to follow. But I think of them as parables. I think you take like Malcolm Gladwell, who's like him or loathe him. He's been unbelievably successful. The key to his success is storytelling. But in his books and his talks, the stories are always there for a reason. He's trying to make a bigger point with each story. So I mean, I'd say that's the key thing with the speaker is don't book someone just for an interesting story. It's like why are you telling us this? What's the deeper?
And what idea can they extract from the interesting life experience they've had? This question I love from Yan Fen, TEDx in China. How can ideas from communities around the world small communities adapt to the whole world? For example, in China, ideas from different cities have different adaptive capabilities. And we look at this every day. We see great ideas from local communities. Are there any things that you could do in preparing a speaker to make them have a wider appeal and a universal appeal?
I mean, it's hard to give a general answer to that. I certainly think, humans have so much more in common than they have differences. There are cultural differences, specific differences in different places. But the things that excite us, we get passionate about, and that we need, and those tend to overlap massively. And so I think it's a very strong likelihood that something that has worked spectacularly well in a particular place is going to have applicability elsewhere. It may not play out in exactly the same way, but so I think the key is to describe an event in terms of what is the underlying principle here, what's the engine, what's the broader conclusion that you might have from it. So I don't know if 4 people collaborate in a specific way to make an amazing house in one particular village in some way. It's not just look at this amazing house and here's the story. It's like, how did they do that? What was the essence? What was unusual about that collaboration? What was it about the way that they related that made this special? And that needs to be explored so that it can be more broadly applied.
Right, kind of breaking it down to its essence. And also sometimes when I go to individual TEDx events, sometimes reminding them that their talk might be viewed on the other side of the world, and having put a one-line explanation to say, this is how we do this, and in China, in this community, when I say this, it means that. It helps spread the idea further. We are actually like at the time limit, and Brian here is writing questions faster than we can speak. So maybe what we'll do, because we actually have so many questions we're not getting to, we might do like a continuation online if just to address some of these. But maybe
we'll do like 5 in 2 minutes.
We'll have 5 in 2 minutes. Okay, let's try. Jose from TEDx Barcelona, can you always find a through line for all talks, or are there talks without them? If not, which types don't deserve a through line or can get away without one?
There probably are a few talks where it's like, here are 5 extraordinary things that I've seen. There are never any rules to this, but it's even better if the 5 things actually connect in some way.
Jimmy Tan from TEDx Xiuan in China. Are you involved in each of the speakers' preparation? How do you manage it when you have so many speakers at one time?
I have been involved in the large majority at the Vancouver conference. In some ways, it's the most satisfying and important work that I do. So I love it. It's just great, and each year we've stepped up efforts. So the answer is yes.
You make the time.
We make the time. Yeah.
Jay Klapik at TEDx Kyoto. What sort of talk would you like to see more of? What are we missing?
Arguments, persuasion. I love talks that change someone's mind. I love Dan Pallotta's talk about non-profits, not necessarily for the arguments they made, but just the structure. It was so damn persuasive. The power of reason we should be celebrating as a community, and it's hard to do well.
Okay, and Jake Broadhurst at TEDx University in Edinburgh, how do you support someone who has an amazing idea but is a poor public speaker?
Oh, well, that increasingly, we used to say you have to have an amazing idea and be able to communicate it. I think one of the learnings of the last few years is that a surprising number of people, perhaps everyone, who has something worth saying can be coached to say it. What matters is that they have that thing worth saying. So that's actually what the book is for. It's like your fear can be overcome, and with practice, you can find a way of communicating your language. It's just you just need to commit to the process.
Okay, and the fifth question and the final one, and appropriately a futuristic one. Ever thought about using virtual reality to rehearse?
Yes. We've seen a couple of VR apps, including one where you literally put on it's as if you're standing on the full TED stage. It's spectacularly convincing, and I think we should build on it. So that those conversations are ongoing.
Terrific. Well, thank you again, Chris. You have a very active and loyal group of fans here, as we can see from their engagement. We'll be seeing all of you. There's about 400 TEDxers, many of you here on this call that will be in Banff in a couple of weeks, and I know we're going to have a lot of time there and to continue these conversations as well. Anything?
No, just really looking forward to it. I am constantly amazed by TEDx, what you guys pull off, and how much time and love and passion you put into it. So thank you for that, and see many of you in Banff soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, and this concludes this call. Hope to see many of you soon. Travel safe wherever you're coming from, and thanks everybody also to Amanda and Brian for making this happen. Take care.
Thanks, guys.